Menstrual phase. Menstrual means it is at that time the bleeding occurs. It can be for 2 days, 3 days, 4 or 5 days depending on the individual. First menstruation begins at puberty and that particular menstruation is called as menarche. Why follicular stimulating hormone should get released? Because the Graafian follicle has to mature during this time. Hello everyone, a warm welcome to today's session on chapter 3 of second PUC, that is human reproduction. I am Dr. Divya, biology faculty, Vidhyaashram Pre-University College, Mysuru, Temple of Excellence. So in the previous session of this chapter, we had discussed about the two important events in the development of gametes, that is the spermatogenesis and the oogenesis. In today's session, let us discuss about the menstrual cycle, and once the male gamete, that is the sperm, and the female gamete, that is the ovum or egg, are formed, how does the fertilization and implantation take place? So let's begin with the session, starting with studying about what is menstrual cycle. So menstrual cycle, we all know that it is the monthly cycle that usually occurs in female at a certain age, right? So it is the reproductive cycle in the female primates. Why we say primates? Because all organisms, in the case of female, they do not exhibit menstrual cycle. There is one more cycle called as estrous cycle. So it is called estrous cycle. So this is also a type of reproductive cycle, but the only thing is, in the estrous cycle, the shedding of the endometrium will not take place. Therefore, the bleeding will not occur or the release of blood will not occur. But in the case of menstrual cycle, the release of blood will occur because of the shedding of the endometrium, and we all know that endometrium is the innermost layer of the uterus wall, right? So therefore, it is only seen in primates. So primates, for example, monkeys, apes and human beings. And this particular reproductive cycle is called as menstrual cycle, which is only seen in the primates. Whereas estrous cycle is seen in non-primates, for example, dogs, cows, sheep, all that. So the first menstruation in a woman, it doesn't start early itself. Of course, we had studied in the previous session of this chapter that, so the process of production of oogonia starts when the baby is in the mother's womb. That is, in the embryo or the fetal stage itself, it will start. But the menstrual cycle will not start that early. The menstrual cycle will start only during the puberty. So the first menstruation begins at puberty and that particular menstruation is called as menarche. So this is one of the important 1 mark question that usually they ask. What is menarche? So it is the first menstruation that begins at puberty in the females, and in human females menstruation is repeated every 28 days, right? So after 28 days again the second cycle of menstruation will start, again the third, fourth, so it keeps on repeating until she reaches a age wherein she is no longer capable of reproduction. So in human females menstruation is repeated at an average interval of about 28 or 29 days, and the cyclic events that start during the menstruation till the next one is called as the menstrual cycle. So what are the cyclic events that occur? So various cyclic events are there. So we'll study in the coming slide with the diagram so that you'll understand better. So here during this particular menstrual cycle, that is in that particular 28 days. So first 3 to 4 or 5 days will be the bleeding, and then the bleeding stops, and then the process of ovulation, the maturation, everything will take place. And next, if the fertilization of the sperm with the ovum does not take place, then after on the 28th or the 29th day, again the female will have a menstrual cycle, or the menstruation will repeat. So once the ovum is released, which is called as ovulation, during the middle of each menstrual cycle. So how many ovum? Only one ovum gets released, and for that one ovum, how many sperms are produced? 300 to 400 million we have studied in the previous session, right? And out of the 300 to 400 million, 60 will be having proper shape and proper head structure and all that. And out of the 60, 40 will be having good motility capacity. So therefore 40 sperms will be there which are competing to fertilize one egg or ovum that is released during the menstrual cycle. So this is about the menstrual cycle. So we shall study in detail about the different events that occur in the menstrual cycle. So the major events of the menstrual cycle, it is mainly divided into 4 events. The first one is the menstruation. The second event is the follicular phase, which is also called as the proliferatory phase. And the third one is the luteal phase, also called as the secretory phase. And the last one is the next cycle, the beginning of the next cycle. So we shall study about each of these events one by one. So first, starting with the first event in menstruation or menstrual cycle, which is called as the menstrual phase. So menstrual phase, menstrual means it is at that time the bleeding occurs. It can be for 2 days, 3 days, 4 or 5 days depending on the individual. So the cycle starts with the menstrual phase when the menstrual flow occurs. Here especially bleeding will occur for about 3 to 5 days. And the menstrual flow, how does the menstrual flow occur? Why does the bleeding occurs? So the menstrual flow is mainly because of the breakdown of the endometrial lining. So we all know that the uterus is covered by 3 important layers, right? You can see the previous sessions and have a look into the diagram wherein I have explained about the structure of the female reproductive system. So there we came to know that it is covered by 3 layers. The outermost perimetrium, the middle one that is the myometrium, which is very thick, and the innermost endometrium, the one that lines the uterine cavity, and therefore that is the one that actually sheds. So when the endometrium breaks down and it sheds, along with its blood vessels, they will come out in the form of liquid. That is what we see in the form of liquid. That is the red colored blood liquid that is oozing out through the vagina. So this is nothing but the menstrual flow. So therefore, in the menstruation phase, the menstrual flow will occur, which lasts about 3 to 5 days depending on the individual. So menstruation only occurs if the released ovum is not fertilized. As I told you, during the menstrual cycle, on the 14th day of the menstrual cycle, what happens is the mature Graafian follicle would have ruptured and it would have released the ovum or the egg. So that ovum or the egg, if it is not fertilized by the sperm, then only on the 28th or the 29th day, the menstruation will begin. Otherwise, it will lead into pregnancy where menstruation will not occur. So lack of menstruation may be indicative of pregnancy. And it may also be caused to, apart from that, lack of menstruation can also be because of many other factors, maybe because of hormones, the stress that we take in our life, and lot of other environmental related factors. Say for example like stress, poor health, the hormones, the food that we take in, our health condition, everything also affects the menstrual cycle. So therefore menstrual phase is only meant for the 3 to 5 days wherein the bleeding will occur. So this is the menstruation from day 1 to day 5. So in some people it can last for 6 to 7 days also, but usually majority, since it lasts for 5 days, they have given it as day 1 to day 5 is the menstruation phase. So after the menstruation phase, what will happen in the menstruation phase? As you can see here, the menses will occur. That is, the menstrual flow will occur. It is during this phase what happens? The uterine events will occur. What is the uterine event occurring? It is nothing but the shedding of the endometrium will occur, which will come out along with its blood vessels in the form of blood. So that is what occurs here. So next, moving on to the next phase. So next phase is the follicular phase. It starts from the 5th or the 7th day, again depending on the individual. So the menstrual phase is followed by the follicular phase. So during the follicular phase, here follicles will get produced. So we had learned that there are many number of follicles that are produced which degenerates later when the girl reaches the puberty or during the reproductive age, and only a few are left. So during this phase, the primary follicle that was formed. So primary follicle is the one that is the remaining follicles that are there, they are called as the primary follicles. So those primary follicles that are formed, so how the primary follicle is formed, all that we have studied in the previous session. So have a look into that particular video. So the primary follicle that is formed in the ovary, it grows to become a fluffy mature Graafian follicle. It is during the follicular phase. So the primary follicles that were formed, they will grow and become a mature Graafian follicle. In that mature Graafian follicle, the secondary oocyte will be produced. And simultaneously, the endometrium of the uterus regenerates through proliferation. Again here, what happens? First to 5 days, the endometrium lining will be shed. That is, it will be lost and it will come out of the body along with the blood, right? After the 5th day, when it is in the follicular phase, what happens? The uterus is preparing itself if at all pregnancy occurs. So how will the uterus prepare itself? The uterus prepares itself in such a way that the endometrium that was lost because of the bleeding in the first 5 days, that will be regenerated. So that regeneration of the endometrium through proliferation will occur in the follicular phase. Now, why will this endometrium regenerate? It regenerates because if at all, once the Graafian follicle matures and ruptures and the mature secondary oocyte or the ovum is released, and if at all fertilization of the sperm occurs, then the uterus should be made ready for the zygote to come and implant itself there. Right. So that is why prior itself the endometrium will start to regenerate again. So making it a safe place for the pregnancy to occur. So these changes in the ovary and the uterus, it will induce the changes in the levels of the pituitary and the ovarian hormones. So it is at that time what all hormones is needed, be it the progesterone, the estrogen, how much amount should be produced, be it the follicular stimulating hormone, various other hormones, all that gets secreted at this particular phase. So that is nothing but the follicular phase, as you can see from somewhere from 7th to the 13th day is the follicular phase. It is the proliferative phase. Why is it called as the proliferative phase? Because in the follicular phase, apart from the primary oocyte maturing to form the Graafian follicle, apart from that, in the uterus, again the lining of the endometrium will start to form again. So that is why it is also called as the proliferative phase. So as you can see here, what all happens here? Here uterine event will also occur. What uterine event will occur? The formation of the endometrium wall. Again regeneration of the endometrium wall will occur. Apart from that, one major event will occur here is the increase in the ovarian hormone level, so that if the sperm is supposed to fertilize the egg, or if the egg has to mature, certain hormones has to be released. If the endometrium has to be formed properly, certain hormones has to be released. So for all that, here estrogen and progesterone hormone will start to increase. It will start to get produced during the follicular phase, but these hormones will not get produced during the menstruation. It will be there, but it will be in minimal quantity, but its increase will slowly start in the follicular phase, that is from the 7th to the 13th day. So this is what happens in the follicular phase, and after that the secretion of the gonadotrophin hormones will occur. So what are the two gonadotrophin hormones? We had studied in the male reproductive structure, right? That is the that is during spermatogenesis, two gonadotrophin hormones, that is the luteinizing hormone and the follicular stimulating hormone, will also get released during this particular follicular phase. Why follicular stimulating hormone should get released? Because the Graafian follicle has to mature during this time. So that is why. So it will increase gradually during the follicular phase, and it will stimulate or it will promote the development of the follicle, and also it will help in the secretion of the estrogen by the growing follicle. So therefore here luteinizing hormone gets secreted, follicular stimulating hormones get secreted. Once the follicular stimulating hormones get secreted, it will make the growing follicles to secrete the estrogen hormone. So therefore, both the luteinizing hormone and the follicular stimulating hormone, they usually increase at the middle cycle, that is on the 14th day, and that is why in the 14th day the Graafian follicle will completely mature, it will rupture or it will break open, and the ovum will be released outside, or the egg will be released outside. So therefore, rapid secretion of the luteinizing hormone will reach its maximum level during the 14th day, and this increase in the luteinizing hormone will induce the rupture of the Graafian follicle, therefore resulting in ovulation, which is nothing but therefore resulting in release of the ovum or the egg. So that particular process occurs. So ovulation, exactly which day it will occur? On the 14th day here. 14th day ovulation will occur. So prior to ovulation occurring, all these hormones should be ready, increased in the quantity that it gets produced. So this is how. So here developing follicle will occur, then after that mature follicle, and as you can see here on the 14th day, if you can see here, you can see the Graafian follicle has ruptured and the ovum has been released. This is the ovum that has been released, or it is also called as the egg. So that is when, if coitus or intercourse occurs on the 14th day, then the sperm will fertilize the egg and the pregnancy will occur. So it depends on the 14th day whether female should enter into the next menstrual cycle or not. So if pregnancy occurs, then the next menstrual cycle will not come. If the pregnancy doesn't occur, again on the 28th or the 29th day, it will go back to this particular stage and the cycle will continue as such. So this is about the follicular phase. And also we need to know one important thing here about the menstrual cycle, that the menstrual cycle doesn't occur in the female throughout a period. It starts at puberty and it will end at a certain age wherein the female loses her ability to reproduce. So human beings, the menstrual cycle comes to an end or it ceases around 50 years of age, and that particular stop of the menstrual cycle is called as the menopause. So this is called as menopause, wherein once the female attains 50 years of age or before that as also, the complete stop of the menstrual cycle will occur. So cyclic menstruation is indicator that the person's reproductive system is very normal and healthy, and the reproductive phases are occurring very well and proper, and therefore the reproductive phase of a particular female should be maintained healthy until from the menarche to the menopause. Menarche means the day the girl starts the menstruation up till the day when she reaches 50 years of age and the menstruation cycle stops. Until then, the reproductive phase continues and the reproductive health should be taken care of. So reproductive health is the next chapter in your second PUC, which is also one of the very informative and important chapter. So before that, we need to learn about one more phase, which is called as the luteal phase or the secretory phase. So in luteal phase, what happens? There is development of the corpus luteum. So there is development of the corpus luteum. So what happens when the corpus luteum develops? So the corpus luteum is important because it is a hormone secreting structure. So this corpus luteum is a hormone secreting structure that develops around the ovum. The ovum that was released from the Graafian follicle, right? That will start to develop corpus luteum. So these hormones are very important in the later stages. So next, after the development of the corpus luteum, it enters into a stage called as the regressing corpus luteum, wherein the corpus luteum starts to degenerate. Why this formation of corpus luteum is important is because this hormone, that is the layer that is formed around the ovum or the egg, which is released by the Graafian follicle on the 14th day, if that hormone layer is formed, which is called as the corpus luteum, it will allow the sperm, it will guide the sperm. I am here, that is the ovum is here, you can come and fertilize. So the acrosome will be able to fertilize only if the corpus luteum is formed. So that corpus luteum will be formed if the intercourse occurs and the sperm enters into the female body. If the sperm doesn't enter into the female body and there is no sperm at all, then what happens slowly in the luteal phase, what happens next is the corpus luteum will start to degenerate because it has no other function, right? And finally the ovum degenerate, and once the ovum degenerate, what happens? It will enter into the next cycle on the 28th day. So next cycle means again what will happen? Menstruation will occur. Again follicular phase will occur, luteal phase will occur. Again here in the follicular phase on the 14th day, if the sperm meets the ovum, then what happens? Then the pregnancy will occur and the menstruation cycle will stop. Otherwise it will continue as such. So this is what happens in the menstrual cycle. And also I told you about the menstrual cycle is not throughout the age of the female. There is one stage called as menopause wherein the menstrual cycle will completely stop or she'll lose the capability to reproduce. Next, moving on to the next topic here, that is fertilization and implantation. Now, the ovum has been released, the sperm also has been released. The sperm will enter in through the vagina and to the cervical canal, and it is moving in search of the ovum so that it can fertilize the ovum. How does the fertilization occur? After the fertilization, the ovum, the zygote that is formed, it has to implant itself in the uterus. So how does that occur? All that we shall study here. So during copulation or during coitus or during intercourse, what happens? The semen is nothing but the sperm with its fluid matrix. So that get released by the penis, which is the external genital structure. In the case of male, it will get released into the vagina. This release of the semen into the vagina is called as insemination because it is getting released into the vagina. So it is called as insemination. Now, once it reaches the vagina, the sperms are motile, right? Because we learned that the middle piece of the sperm contains a lot of mitochondria. That mitochondria will supply energy to the tail of the sperm, which will help the sperm to move very fast. So the motile sperms will start to swim rapidly. It will pass through the cervix, then it will enter into the uterus, and finally it will reach the ampullary region of the fallopian tube. Which was the ampullary region of the fallopian tube? That part almost near the infundibulum, right? So that part it will reach because there the ovule would have been present. Now here the sperm is ready. Now when the sperm is ready, the egg should be ready, the ovum should be ready, right? So what will happen here on the 14th day, that is during the follicular phase, what will happen? The ovum will be released by the ovary. What is the ovum? It is nothing but the egg. It will be released by the ovary and that will also get transported to the ampullary region. So the ovary that is there, it will release the ovum. That ovum will be collected by the fimbriae which is present in the infundibulum of the fallopian tube. From the infundibulum of the fallopian tube, it will enter into the ampulla. So now the ovum is there in the ampulla. The sperm has also reached the ampulla. Now there the sperm will meet the ovum. What will happen? And that is the region, in the ampulla region, what will happen? The fertilization will take place. That is, the sperm goes and fertilizes itself with the ovum. So once the fertilization occurs, and we should know that fertilization can occur only if the ovum and the sperms are transported simultaneously to the ampullary region. Both should occur simultaneously. It is not that the sperm enters and travels after 2 days of the ovum being released. That will not help. So simultaneously it has to occur. And this is the reason why not all copulations lead to fertilization and pregnancy, because the release of the sperm and the release of the ovum both has to occur at the same time, and the best time for the release of the ovum or the egg is on the 14th day of the menstrual cycle, 14 to somewhat after that, until the corpus luteum is formed, until then. But once the corpus luteum starts to degenerate, nothing can be done. So that period of time is very, very important. So next, moving on to further, now I told you the process that fertilization will occur. So what is fertilization? The process of fusion of sperm with an ovum is called as fertilization. Now during fertilization, the sperms will come in contact with, the sperm comes in contact with the zona pellucida layer of the ovum. So the sperm that is there, as you can see, these sperms, they will come in contact with the zona pellucida layer. So this zona pellucida layer, it is one of the outermost layer of the ovum, and it is a hormone secreting. It is made up of proteins, and it is a layer that actually secretes some hormone. That hormone is very important because it is the one which directs the sperm head towards itself. So that is why it is very, very important. And this induces changes in the membrane, and it blocks the entry of the additional sperm. Why it will block the entry of the additional sperm? Because only one sperm can fertilize the egg. Out of the 40 sperms that are highly motile, only one sperm can fertilize. Because we learned that 300 to 400 million sperms are produced, out of which 60 might be of good quality. In that good quality, only 40 might be highly motile. So out of the 40, only one will go and fertilize. So as soon as one fertilizes, what happens? The zona pellucida will block the other sperms from fertilizing the ovum. So that is what happens. So thus it ensures that only one sperm can fertilize an ovum. So the secretions of the, and not just that, this zona pellucida also instigates the acrosome. So what is the acrosome? We had seen right in the head of the sperm, the tip of the sperm head is covered by a structure which is called as acrosome, which is filled with some enzymes, right? So if those enzymes has to be secreted and all that, the zona pellucida also helps in turn. So the secretions of the acrosome, it helps the sperm to enter into the cytoplasm of the ovum through the zona pellucida and the plasma membrane. So it can enter into through the zona pellucida, and then it will enter into the plasma membrane, and it will insert itself into the ovum. That is when the fertilization would become complete. Now after fertilization, this will induce the completion of the meiotic division of the secondary oocyte, and the second meiotic division, which is also an unequal division, results in the formation of a second polar body and a haploid ovum or a oocyte. So all this we have seen in the schematic diagram I have shown you. So when all this is occurring, what happens? Now the polar body gets formed, then the secondary oocyte gets formed. So secondary oocyte is nothing but ovum. Ovum and all will get formed. It will be ready by that particular time. Soon the haploid nucleus of the sperm and that of the ovum will fuse together, and it will form a diploid zygote. A diploid zygote will get formed here. Now what happens to this? Why is it diploid zygote? Because the sperm was haploid, and the secondary oocyte, which is also called as the ovum, was also haploid. So n plus n, it became a diploid, 2n. So it will become a diploid zygote. So this is what it will form. Now this zygote, what will happen to it? Let us look into. So the zygote, so the mitotic division starts once the zygote moves through the isthmus. Now if you remember, that is the fallopian tube of the uterus, it had a region which was long and tubular called as the isthmus region, right? So from the ampullar region, where did the sperm meet the ovum? In the ampullar region of the fallopian tube. From the ampulla region, once the fertilization occur and the zygote is formed, that zygote will move through the isthmus region of the fallopian tube. So the mitotic division starts once the zygote starts to, as the zygote moves through the isthmus of the oviduct. So oviduct is nothing but it is also called as the fallopian tube, and it will go and cleave itself in the uterus, means it will go and embed itself in the uterus. So if you can see here, here is the ovary. In this ovary, what has been produced? The Graafian follicle. This Graafian follicle will mature, it will rupture. Once it ruptures, what it will release? This one, the thing that it will release is the egg, or it is also called as the ovum. Once this ovum is released, what happens? This whole thing is the fallopian tube. I'll just write it as FT. In the fallopian tube, this is the ampulla region, right? This is the ampulla region. I'll write it as A. In the ampulla region, what happens? The sperm which would have entered in through the cervix will travel like this, and it will come and fertilize the egg or the ovum. Once it fertilizes the egg or the ovum, what happens? The division, it will form a zygote. Zygote is unicellular. That unicellular will form a bicellular, then it will form a tricellular, then it will go into multicellular stage. As you can see here, here is the ovum or the egg, which will be fertilized by the sperm. Then it will undergo first round of division, then mitotic, then second round of division, and then the third round of division. Like this, the mitotic division will occur. So this mitotic division of the zygote will start later on once it reaches into the uterus. So once it reaches the uterus, as you can see here, once it reaches the uterus, it will be, first it will form 2 daughter cells, then it will form 4 daughter cells, 8 daughter cells, and 16 daughter cells. So the 16 daughter cells are called as the blastomeres. So the blastomeres is nothing but the embryo, which consists of 8 to 16 blastomeres, and it is called as a morula. So what is this morula? It contains 8 to 16 blastomeres. How did this blastomeres form? The blastomeres formed because of the mitotic cell division. So here, this is the morula. The morula will reach the uterus. So once the morula reaches the uterus, the morula will continue again to divide, and it will form a blastocyst. This blastocyst will further move into the uterus. So as you can see here, this is the blastocyst. Same thing here, I'll just write it here. It will form the blastocyst, which will further move into the uterus. Now this blastomeres in the blastocyst are arranged in an outer layer called as the trophoblast, and an inner group of cells attached to the trophoblast called as the inner cell mass. So what will it have? So I'll write it here. Here also we can see the so this is the blastocyst which has entered into the uterus, but it has not implanted itself. So what is this blastocyst made up of? It is made up of an outer layer of cells, which is called trophoblast, and it has a inner group of cells. So this is the outer layer of the cells called as trophoblast. This is one, this particular one is the inner group of cells, which is called as the inner cell mass. So it has an outer layer of cells called as trophoblast and an inner layer of cells which is called as the inner cell mass. So this is what the blastocyst will have. Now the blastocyst has not embedded in the or not implanted itself in the uterus. So how will it implant? We shall see under implantation. Now the blastocyst, which is having 8 to 16 blastomeres, and it is made up of an outer layer of cells and an inner layer of cell mass. Outer layer of cell called as trophoblast and inner layer of cell mass. Now that has to implant itself in the uterus. It has to fix itself in the uterus. That particular process is called as implantation. So the trophoblast layer, which is the outermost layer of the blastocyst, they gets attached to the endometrium of the uterus. So what is the endometrium? It is the inner layer of the uterus, and then it gets differentiated, and then the inner cell mass that is there. What did I tell you? The outer layer is made up of trophoblast, cells called trophoblast, right? And inner layer is made up of an inner mass of cell is there. Inner mass of cell. So the outer layer, as you can see, outer layer, it will embed itself in the uterus. It will fix itself in the uterus. What about the inner cells? The inner cells will form the embryo. This inner cell that is there, it will form the embryo. So that embryo will develop into the fetus. The fetus will then, after 9 months, it will get ejected out of the female vagina. That is, birth of the baby will take place. So after attachment, the uterine cells divide rapidly and it covers the blastocyst. Entire blastocyst it will cover. Can you see the inner cells that are there? They will start to divide rapidly, and entire blastocyst they will cover. Entire blastocyst inside the cells will be present. As a result, the blastocyst becomes embedded in the endometrium of the uterus, and this is called as implantation, and this implantation leads to pregnancy. So this is what actually occurs from the 14th day if the sperm fertilizes the ovum. If it doesn't, then what happens? The next menstrual cycle will start in the 28th or the 29th day. So this is about implantation. So this is how the menstrual cycle will occur, and if on the 14th day, if the fertilization of the ovum and the sperm takes place, then the implantation will occur, which will lead to pregnancy. If not, the menstrual cycle will begin on the 28th or the 29th day. So this was about today's session. In the next coming session, we shall study about the topics, that is pregnancy. So what happens in pregnancy? So we understood now fertilization occurred, implantation occurred, all that. So implantation means pregnancy has occurred. So what exactly happens in pregnancy, and how does the embryo development take place? Because the embryo will be in the form of a mass of cells. How do they form? How do they form into a fetus? All that we shall study in the coming session, and also we shall study about the process of giving birth, which is called as parturition, and the process of giving the secretion of the milk from the mammary glands, that is lactation. So all that we shall study in the coming session. So we shall meet in the coming session. Thank you.